Good day everyone. Today we're going to discuss about the computing test statistic value involving population proportion. After going through this module, you are expected to 1. Describe the Z statistic proportion. 2. Compute the Z value for population proportion. And 3. Solve problems involving the Z value for population proportion.
Before we proceed, let's have some short activity to gain some ideas and clues, especially knowledge about our topic or lesson. So, we have a short paragraph and after that, meron tayong few questions to answer it. A recent survey done by the Philippine Housing Authority found that 35% of the population owns their homes. In a random sample of 240 heads of households, 78 responded that they own their homes. So let's proceed to our guide questions. First one, what part of the whole population owns their home? So basically, makikita na natin sa paragraph na nandoon na yung keyword which is the population owns their homes. And malalaman din natin na 35% of population owns their homes. So our answer is 35%. Next, what is the value of P? P is our population proportion. Like number one's answer, it's 35%, but it uses percentage. Sa population proportion, kailangan natin gawin siyang in decimal. So, paano natin gagawin decimal? 35 divided by 100 equals 0.35. So, our population proportion or our P is 0.35. What is the size of sample or our N? N is our sample size. In paragraph, makikita na rin natin ang keyword na random sample. So, sa random sample, nandoon na yung paragraph na 240 heads of households. So, what's our sample size? It's 240. How many owned their homes or X? Our X is basically makikita na natin sa paragraph, which is sa last part. Mababasa natin na 78 responded that they own their homes. So what's our X? It's 78. Lastly, compute the value of P hat. So how to compute P hat? P hat is equivalent to X over X. So like what we answered earlier, X is equal to 78 and N is equal to 240. Because the formula is X over N to find P hat, 78 is divided by 240 and the answer is 0.325 or 0.325. And now, we have some idea what we're going to talk about. Let's proceed to our main topic or discussion.
It is observable that the previous cited situation did not use nor mention words like mean or average, but percentage instead. Also, it utilized count data. Problems such as this involves population proportion. Inferences involving proportions are made in the context of probability of success, P, in a binomial distribution. From the situation that we presented in the above activity, the respondents have only two possible options for their responses, and those are the following. Option 1. They own their house, success or P. Option 2. They do not own their house, failure or Q. Showing if the number of samples is large enough, as the central limit theorem states, we need to satisfy the two assumptions. It is evident that the responses have only two possible outcomes, owned, success, or not owned, failure. Therefore, the condition for binomial experiment is met. Also, to be able to satisfy the condition that NP greater than 5 and NQ greater than 5.
The first thing you should know is the condition for estimating population proportion. Make sure each situation meet these conditions. Number 3 here will determine if the sample size is sufficiently large. If it is, we can apply the central limit theorem and we can use the normal distribution to model the sampling distribution for the sample proportions. Hence, we can use the C-test.
Now let's continue answering the activity we did earlier. A recent survey done by the Philippine Housing Authority found that 35% of the population owns their homes. In a random sample of 240 heads of households, 78 responded that they own their homes. Before we answer this activity, let's see if this situation meets the condition for estimating population proportion. Number 1. The sample is a simple random sample. It says here, in a random sample of. So number 1, definitely check. Number 2, the condition for the binomial distribution is satisfied. There is a fixed number of trials. This is our sample size, 240 of households, or our N. Next, the trials are independent. The answer of one household will not affect the answer of other households. Next one, there are two categories of outcomes. It's either they own their home or not. And last, the probability remains constant for each trial. The probability of getting answer whether they own their homes or not remains constant for the rest of 240 households. Here, we are going to compute this one a little later. After that, let's determine the given from this situation. The P here, or the population proportion, is equal to 0.35. N, or the sample size, is equal to 240. And X, or the number of successes, is equal to 78. Our phi hat is equal to 0.325 and our Q is equal to 0.65. To determine if the sample size is sufficiently large, let us solve for NP. Our N again is 240, our P is 0.35. And the product of this is 84. And this is greater than 5. Now let's solve for NQ. Again, our N is 240. Our Q now is 0.65. This will give us 156 and still greater than 5. Both NP and NQ are greater than 5. Therefore, the sample size is sufficiently large. Now, I'm going to introduce to you the formula that we are going to use in solving population proportion.
Again, CCOM stands for the C-test statistic for proportion. P hat is the sample proportion. P is the population proportion. N is the sample size. And lastly, Q is equal to 1 minus P.
Now that we have all identified the given, we are now going to solve the problem from the activity we did earlier.
Let us recall our answer from the activity earlier and also the formula on computing the C statistic. We uses the notation C tab because the value comes from the C table. In this situation, we will use the CCOM to indicate that the value comes from the computation using this formula.
Now, let us substitute the given from the formula.
After substituting the given, we can now solve the problem. First, we will minus 0.325 to 0.35 and then times 0.35 to 0.65, and the product of this should be like on the screen.
After that, we will be dividing 0.2275 to 240, and it is equal to 0.009479. Now let's get the square root of 0.0079 0.009479. And the product of this should be 0.03079. The last thing we should do is divide negative 0.25 to 0.03079. And therefore, the computed C value is CCOM equal to 0.812. If you are still confused, here are another example.
Example number 2 po, ganito po yan. Determine mo lang ang ZCOM, kumbaga hahanapin mo lang. Given na ang kailangan mo tulad ng N, phi, hat, at P. Sa solution, makikita mo yung gagamitin mo for formula except sa ZCOM kasi yun ang hahanapin. Then, substitute na. Sa substitute, papalitan mo lang yung mga kinakailangan na dapat palitan tapos compute lang. Ang magiging total ay yun na ang sagot.
Example number 3. The claim is made that 40% of taxpayers use computer software to file their taxes. In a sample of 50, 14 use computer software to their taxes. To test, HO, P is equal to 0.4 versus HA, P is greater than 0.4. At alpha is equal to 0.05. Where P is the population proportion who use computer software to file their taxes. And to test using binomial distribution and test using the normal approximation to the binomial distribution. Determine first the value of ZCOM. Now, let's determine the ZCOM. First, let's find out the P hat, P, N, and Q. Our P hat is equivalent to X over N. In the paragraph, X is equal to 14 and N is equal to 50. So, 14 over or divided by 50 is equal to 0.28. Based on the paragraph, our population proportion is 40%, but we don't use percentage. So we're going to transfer it into decimal. 40 divided by 100 is equal to 0.40. Our N is given, which is 50. Our Q is equivalent to 1 minus P. Our P is 0.40. Now we're just going to substitute it. 1 minus 0.40 is equal to 0.60. Now we find out the equivalent of each. Now we move forward to our computation. The formula of ZCOM is P hat minus P over square root of P times 1 minus P over N. So we are just going to substitute all of the variables that given. Now our formula is 0.28 minus 0.40 over square root of 0.40 times 0.60 over 50. Now, we're just going to subtract 0.28 minus 0.40. 0.28 minus 0.40 is equal to negative 0.12. And now we're just going to multiply the 0.40 times 0.60. 0.40 times 0.60 is equal to 0.24. So dahil may square root pa siya, hindi pa natin siya pwedeng i-divide. So let's find out what is the square root of 0.0048. The square root of 0.0048 is equal to 0.069. Dahil wala na tayong ibang kukumputin, mag-stick in na tayo sa ating last computation, which is negative 0.12 divided by 0.069 is equal to negative 1.739. So, our ZCOM is negative 1.739.
That's all. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something in this video lesson. You can answer the assessment that we prefer to know if you have learned something.